The typical American expects to retire at 66. They actually stop working at 61. That represents a 5-year gap they did not choose, did not anticipate, and had no ability to undo, driven not by personal decisions but by job eliminations, health emergencies, and corporate reorganizations. According to the Employee Benefit Research Institute's 2026 survey, 76% of all unplanned early retirements were caused by circumstances completely beyond the individual's control. 76%. Not poor financial choices, not inadequate savings habits. A structural ambush. And here's precisely why 52 is the specific age I am going to spend the next 20 minutes examining. 3 compounding forces align simultaneously at this age, and only at this age, that create a genuine opportunity to construct a financial cushion against that ambush before the opportunity disappears. Consider 2 people, both 52, both with $200,000 already saved, both intending to retire at 67. One begins maximizing contributions immediately, the other delays 6 years. The difference in their retirement portfolio at 67 is not $195,000 in missed deposits. It is $428,000. That is what time does to money when compound growth is permitted to operate. Here is the core argument, stated plainly. The standard retirement guidance, maximize your 401k, diversify your holdings, trust the 4% rule, retire at 65, was engineered around a version of reality that no longer exists. The 4% rule was developed in 1994, the same year the internet was primarily used for email and a rock band from Seattle dominated popular culture. Pre-Medicare healthcare costs were not running $17,000 annually. The Secure 2.0 Act's super catch-up contribution provision had not yet been created. The ACA marketplace subsidies that expired at the close of 2025 were not yet a factor. The structural research on involuntary workforce separations in the early 50s had not yet been compiled. The advice solidified. The world continued evolving. What this video will walk you through is why 52 represents a genuine financial inflection point, not a motivational milestone dressed up in numbers. This is not about willpower or discipline or the variety of content that concludes with some version of believe in yourself and let your habits compound. This is about orbital mechanics. More than a decade was spent operating a business surrounded by accountants and tax attorneys who explained how money actually moves. Not in theory, not inside a financial planning textbook, but in reality, through tax filings and business structures, and the gradual process of building wealth, while simultaneously observing what happens to people who run out of financial runway. Significant personal capital is invested in the strategies discussed here. This is not simply an opinion. There is real skin in the game. And what has been consistently observed is that the people who genuinely change their retirement trajectory in their 50s did so by grasping one essential truth early. You are not simply saving for retirement. You are in a race against a clock, tied to an involuntary exit you cannot foresee. Here is a way to think about it. Consider how NASA determines a launch window. They do not select it based on convenience. They select it because the gravitational alignment of planetary bodies, the available orbital trajectories, and the thrust-to-payload ratio all converge within a specific interval where reaching the same destination requires the least possible fuel expenditure. Outside that window, the destination is still theoretically reachable, but it costs more, takes longer, or sometimes the trajectory simply does not close at all. Age 52 is your launch window. Reaching the identical destination, genuine financial independence at 65 or 67, demands dramatically less fuel from this point. From here, 15 years of compounding runway remain before full retirement age. You are still positioned favorably within the forced exit probability distribution, and you are currently inside a collection of tax code provisions that have been meaningfully upgraded within the last 2 years. Provisions that the majority of people your age have not yet discovered. Miss this window and you are not disqualified, but you are launching from a worse angle against heavier resistance. In retirement planning, a worse angle does not manifest as a philosophical disappointment. It manifests as monthly income. Specifically, less of it for decades. The window is open until it is not. In a few minutes, the specific contribution arithmetic that makes 52 such a powerful compounding moment will be laid out. But first, the structural reality that makes the clock more urgent than most retirement content is willing to acknowledge must be understood. A paper from the Urban Institute, published in 2018 and still representing the most rigorous analysis on this specific question, titled How Secure is Employment at Older Ages, found that approximately half of full-time, full-year workers between the ages of 51 and 54 experience an employer-related involuntary job separation. 1 in 2. That figure encompasses layoffs, company closures, and organizational restructuring. It does not include the people who were effectively pushed out through arrangements that technically appeared voluntary. Layer onto that the EBRI's 2026 data. 41% of early retirees identified a health problem or disability as the reason they left the workforce. Corporate-driven changes, including downsizing, business closures, and organizational restructuring, accounted for 35% of early retirements, making employer-driven displacement the second most common involuntary cause. Those two categories alone account for 76% of all unplanned early exits. Approximately 5 years separates what Americans plan and what actually occurs. Non-retirees set 66 as their target. Most exit the workforce at 61. That gap is almost entirely involuntary in origin. Consider a man we will call Raymond. He was a logistics manager at a mid-sized manufacturing company in the Midwest. 23 years with the same employer. He earned approximately $90,000 annually, had roughly $230,000 in his 401k at age 54, and possessed a plan, the kind most people have, which exists primarily in their heads, and involves getting serious about contributions once things calm down a bit. At 56, the company was acquired. His division was restructured. He spent 7 months searching for comparable employment, then accepted a $62,000 position because that was what the market was offering. 2 years after that, a back injury ended that job as well. Raymond claimed Social Security at 62, not as a deliberate strategy, but as a financial necessity. That single decision, made under financial pressure without any buffer in place, locked in a permanent 30% reduction in his monthly benefit for the remainder of his life. Here is the perspective shift I want you to carry through everything that follows. You likely believe the primary problem at 52 is that you have not saved enough yet. That is the emotional problem. The actual problem is time architecture. At 52, 15 years of compounding runway remain, 15 years of maximum contribution windows under current law, and critically, you are still positioned on the favorable side of the forced exit distribution curve. The peak involuntary separation risk does not fully activate until most workers reach their mid to late 50s. Age 52 represents a final window in which a meaningful financial buffer can be constructed before the danger zone fully opens. Once you reach 58, 59, or 60, the forced exit risk is present tense, not future tense. The window is open until it is not. Stay with me because the arithmetic in the next section demonstrates what acting from age 52 actually produces in dollar terms. And it is somewhat embarrassing for conventional wisdom. Let us examine the specific contribution mechanics, because something exists within the current tax code that became fully operational on January 1st, 2026. Something that most people in their early 50s have either not yet absorbed or genuinely remain unaware of. For 2026, the employee 401k elective deferral limit is $24,500. The catch-up contribution limit that generally applies for employees aged 50 and over is $8,000 in 2026. This means anyone 50 or older can legally direct $32,500 per year into a 401k. But here is the detail almost no one discusses adequately. Under a provision introduced by the Secure 2.0 Act, a higher catch-up contribution ceiling applies specifically for employees who turn 60, 61, 62, or 63. For 2026, this elevated catch-up limit is $11,250 rather than $8,000. Congress created a specific super catch-up provision targeting the highest risk pre-retirement window. It is written into the tax code. The majority of people in that age bracket are leaving thousands of dollars in tax-advantaged contribution space, unclaimed every single year. Now, the arithmetic that actually matters. Two people, both 52, both with $200,000 already saved, both targeting retirement at 67, both assuming a 7% annual return. Person A begins maximizing their 401k at $32,500 per year starting today. Person B waits until 58 to do the same. By age 67, both individuals' existing $200,000 has compounded for 15 years at 7%, growing to approximately $552,000. That figure is identical for both, since both kept their existing savings invested. Here is where the paths diverge sharply. Person A's 15 years of $32,500 annual contributions compound to approximately $817,000. Total portfolio, roughly $1.37 million. Person B contributing for only 9 years instead of 15 generates approximately $389,000 from the same annual contribution amount. Total portfolio, approximately $940,000. The difference is $428,000. Person B contributed $195,000 less in actual deposit dollars. The additional $233,000 shortfall represents the compounding penalty on the delay itself, not the missing deposits. The mathematics punish the procrastination more severely than the absent contributions did. Compounding does not accommodate plans. It responds only to the years provided to it. By the way, if you find this content valuable, please subscribe. Otherwise, the algorithm may stop placing these videos in your feed. Morningstar's 2025 retirement income research identifies 3.9% as the highest safe starting withdrawal rate for retirees seeking consistent inflation-adjusted spending with a 90% probability of maintaining funds across an assumed 30-year retirement horizon. For a $1 million portfolio, Morningstar's 3.9% safe withdrawal rate produces $39,000 annually in inflation-adjusted income. Applied to the $1.37 million portfolio, that generates approximately $53,400 per year in portfolio income before Social Security. Applied to the $940,000 portfolio, it produces $36,600. A 6-year delay in starting, a delay that probably felt like I will address this once things settle down, creates a $16,800 annual income gap that persists every year across potentially 3 decades of retirement. That represents more than $504,000 in total lost retirement income from 6 years of postponement. Things do not settle down. That observation is not pessimism. It is the consistent historical pattern. Here is the element that never appears in a retirement calculator. And it is why a specific tool was built to address that absence. Understanding these numbers and constructing a system that genuinely withstands the sequence of events just described, forced exit, healthcare bridge, Social Security timing, withdrawal strategy, are 2 entirely separate challenges. The math is the map, the system is the vehicle. A digital resource called the Exit Code was built specifically for this purpose. It represents an analysis of 50 years of retirement data distilled into a mathematical framework for converting the vague aspiration of maybe someday I will retire into a specific, defensible target date. 2 elements within it connect directly to what has been discussed here. The 58% rule and the buffer strategy for individuals displaced from the workforce before their plan is fully funded, which, as the data shows, affects roughly half of all workers in their early 50s. And the dynamic withdrawal method, which replaces the rigid 4% rule with a flexible framework that survives poor early returns. The phenomenon Morningstar's own research identifies as the first 5 years danger zone. The entire framework is grounded in 50 years of actual retirement data, not theoretical modeling. It is available through the link in the description for less than the cost of dinner out. Every year, that kind of structural clarity is delayed compounds against you. Not metaphorically, but mathematically. The numbers have been shown. Now consider what happens on the withdrawal side where retirement plans quietly collapse. And it begins with a rule invented the same year the internet was primarily composed of email. Bill Bengen developed the 4% rule in 1994. He was a financial planner who determined that an annual withdrawal rate of 4% was the level that would sustain investors through retirement across any historical economic scenario based on actual market data. That was legitimate research producing a legitimate finding. The problem is what happened afterward. The 4% rule calcified into universal doctrine without serious updating to reflect the world that actually exists today. Morningstar's research now suggests that clients retiring in 2026 should begin with a withdrawal rate of 3.9%. And that, when adjusted for inflation, this rate can sustain a 30-year retirement without depletion. 3.9%, not 4. And that applies to a 30-year retirement. For a 40-year retirement, applicable to someone retiring between ages 50 and 55, research suggests a safe withdrawal rate of 3.25 to 3.5%. Apply those figures to where the median American in their late 50s actually stands. The median retirement savings for Americans aged 55 to 64 is $185,000, far below the $1.46 million that Americans themselves identify as the figure needed to retire comfortably in 2026. At 3.9%, a $185,000 portfolio generates $7,215 per year, roughly $601 per month before taxes. That is not a retirement income. That is a rounding error in a monthly household budget. Despite this reality, only 42% of Americans aged 45 to 59 feel their retirement savings are on track. The majority of people in this age group carry a quiet awareness that something is off, but they lack the specific numbers required to act with precision. That awareness without action gap is where retirement outcomes go to die. Here is what deserves serious reflection. The mainstream financial system has not failed savers through any deliberate intent. It has failed them through the collective perpetuation of a fiction. That standard diversification guidance applied to whatever contribution amount a person can afford produces adequate retirement outcomes for median earners. The 4% rule was always implicitly calibrated for people who had accumulated close to $1 million. It was then presented as universally applicable guidance. That is not a conspiracy. It is institutional momentum. The advice functioned in the 1990s for the population it was originally designed to serve. No one updated the materials. The figure Americans identify as necessary for a comfortable retirement in 2026 is $1.46 million. The typical financial advisor's response to a client who is 53 years old with $185,000 saved is a presentation featuring a colorful pie chart illustrating how diversified the client is across 5 funds that all track essentially the same index with marginally different expense ratios. The phenomenon known as sequence of returns risk describes how the timing of portfolio withdrawals combined with market declines can determine how long retirement savings actually last. The first 5 years of retirement represent the critical danger zone for drawing from accounts during a market downturn. According to Morningstar portfolio strategist Amy Arnott, research demonstrated that retirees who encountered poor investment returns in the opening 5 years of retirement and failed to reduce spending were substantially more likely to exhaust their savings than retirees who experienced favorable early returns. This is the hidden force multiplier embedded in every retirement savings shortfall. The 4% rule implicitly assumes that 4% of a stable portfolio can be withdrawn in a predictable, linear fashion. Real retirement does not operate that way. Recessions do not schedule themselves to arrive conveniently in year 10 of a withdrawal phase. They arrive when they arrive. And if they arrive in year 2 or 3, like when assets are being liquidated at depressed prices to fund daily living expenses, the number of shares available to benefit from any eventual recovery is permanently reduced. Consider 2 investors with identical $1 million portfolios and identical withdrawal rates of $50,000 per year. One experiences a 15% market decline in the first 2 years of retirement. The other encounters that same decline in year 10, following 9 years of positive returns. The investor who faces the early decline runs out of money dramatically sooner than the one who encounters it later. Same portfolio size, same withdrawal amount, different timing, completely different outcome. That is the retirement variable absent from every product sales presentation. This is also where the solution becomes particularly interesting, because the remedy for sequence risk, the correction for the 4% trap, and the protection against forced exit all flow through the same set of decisions, most of which need to be made before age 60, not at 65 while reviewing enrollment documents. Let me return to Raymond. He was introduced earlier as someone who was restructured out of his position at 56 and claimed Social Security at 62 under financial duress. The precise dollar cost of that Social Security decision deserves examination because this is where the story resolves and the stakes become concrete. Claiming Social Security at 62 reduces a benefit by 30% compared to claiming at full retirement age. If the claimant dies before a spouse, the surviving partner's benefit is reduced by 35%. Conversely, delaying Social Security beyond full retirement age increases the benefit by approximately 8% per year until age 70. Waiting until 70 produces a monthly benefit 24% higher than claiming at full retirement age, representing a 77% total difference in monthly income between claiming at 62 and waiting until 70. If Raymond's full retirement age benefit was $2,000 per month, claiming at 62 locked him into $1,400. Waiting until 70 would have delivered $2,480. That is $1,080 less every single month for the remainder of his life. Comparing claiming at 62 versus waiting until 70, the cumulative advantage of early claiming disappears between ages 80 and 81. If Raymond lives to 85, the lifetime gap exceeds $60,000 in Social Security income he never receives. Not because he failed to earn it, but because he had no financial runway left to wait. Here is the invisible cost that transforms this from unfortunate to genuinely destabilizing. At the close of 2025, the enhanced premium tax credits that had been suppressing ACA marketplace premiums since 2021 expired without renewal. For early retirees, the subsidy cliff at 400% of the federal poverty level has returned in full force. Anyone earning above approximately $62,600 as a single individual in 2026 now pays the full unsubsidized price for marketplace coverage, which can exceed $1,500 per month at age 62 in certain rating areas. A 64-year-old approaching Medicare eligibility could see annual healthcare costs increase from approximately $5,328 to $16,500, an annual increase exceeding $11,000. The most vulnerable segment of the population is middle-income Americans, aged 50 to 64, which is precisely the population this entire discussion addresses. A 64-year-old paying $16,500 annually for health insurance while waiting to become Medicare eligible is essentially paying a subscription fee for the right to eventually access Medicare coverage. Raymond is out of the workforce. He is receiving a permanently reduced Social Security check. He lacks employer-sponsored insurance. He is 3 years from Medicare eligibility, and his marketplace premium has roughly tripled. Each of these outcomes is a direct consequence of having no financial buffer in place before the forced exit occurred at 56. The launch window mattered. He missed it, not because he was irresponsible. He was a loyal employee of 23 years who effectively treated his employer as his retirement plan. He missed it because he never understood the time architecture of his own financial situation. Here is how the Social Security timing mathematics connects back to the launch window concept in a way worth being very specific about. Delaying Social Security past full retirement age increases the benefit by approximately 8% per year through age 70. Waiting until 70 can increase monthly Social Security payments by up to 24% above the full retirement age benefit amount. To wait until 70, A retiree must be capable of funding 3 to 8 years of living expenses without any Social Security income. That is the bridge problem. And the only way to solve the bridge problem without liquidating portfolio assets at depressed valuations, without becoming your own sequence of returns risk, is to have constructed a significant investment buffer, ideally beginning before age 55. The 15-year runway available from age 52 is the final window during which that bridge can be built, with sufficient compounding momentum to make it financially viable without requiring extraordinary annual savings rates. For a married couple, the decision about when to claim Social Security can represent a lifetime benefit difference ranging from $200,000 to $500,000. Yet nearly 30% of retirees claim at the earliest possible age of 62, frequently without fully understanding the long-term consequences. That is not because 30% of retirees performed a rational analysis and concluded early claiming was optimal for their projected life expectancy. The majority were in Raymond's situation. Financial pressure made the decision for them. The window is open until it is not. Let the numbers become concrete through a specific scenario. Consider a man named David. He is 52 years old, earns $95,000 annually, has $215,000 in his 401k, and approximately $30,000 in a regular savings account. 12 years remain on his mortgage. He currently contributes about $12,000 per year to his retirement account, roughly half the standard contribution limit with no catch-up contributions, which represents the national average behavior for someone in his income bracket. On his current trajectory, assuming a 7% annual return and the same $12,000 annual contribution maintained for 15 years through age 67, his existing $215,000 grows to approximately $592,000. 15 years of $12,000 annual contributions compound to roughly $312,000. Total portfolio at 67, approximately $904,000. Safe withdrawal at Morningstar's 3.9% rate, $35,260 per year from the portfolio, plus an estimated Social Security benefit of approximately $23,400 annually at full retirement age based on his earnings history. Total estimated retirement income, approximately $58,600 before taxes. Manageable, but not comfortable. One unexpected healthcare expense away from fragile. Now David makes 3 specific decisions beginning immediately. Decision 1. He raises his 401k contribution to the legal maximum of $32,500 per year. That is a $20,500 annual increase. Aggressive but achievable on $95,000 if mortgage management is tight and lifestyle inflation is held flat. Not easy, necessary. Decision 2. He maps out the healthcare bridge explicitly. He models his modified adjusted gross income from the moment he plans to stop working through age 65, identifying years in which taxable income can be managed to qualify for ACA marketplace subsidies. This requires coordinating IRA withdrawal sequencing, capital gains harvesting, and Roth conversion strategy. Not in retirement, but now, while 13 years remain to architect the structure. Decision 3, he targets Social Security at 70 rather than 67. He establishes a dedicated bridge fund using his after-tax savings and maps out 7 years of living expenses needed to cover the period between a targeted retirement at 63 and his Social Security start date at 70. New outcome at 67. His $215,000 grows to the same $592,000. His 15 years of $32,500 annual contributions compound to approximately $880,000. Total portfolio, approximately $1.47 million. Safe withdrawal at 3.9%, $57,330 per year, plus his Social Security benefit taken at 70, 24% above his full retirement age benefit, yielding roughly $31,600 per year. Total pre-tax retirement income, approximately $89,000 annually. That is a $30,400 annual difference in retirement income produced by 3 decisions made at age 52.